our ancestors are not dangerous, but our work with them has to be conscious and careful and measured in a way, so that we don't fall into our own romanticism.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. How y'all doing today? Excellent, excellent, excellent. Thank y'all so much for joining us here at Sankofa Videos and Books. This is, of course, your Pan-African hub for all things lifestyle, culture, anything else that's really good for you, pretty much. We have a really lovely program tonight, but I like that right there, by the way. That's nice. That's nice. You're in the right place. You're definitely in the right place. You're amongst friends for sure. Oh, let me put it up. Excellent. Before we begin, of course, we're going to get some things out the way, and I'm going to pass it on to the great professor over here. So, of course, we do events all the time. If you miss any events with us, you can check us out on YouTube. It's all at our page, Sankofa VB. You just go search that up on YouTube, and you can find anything that we've done here in the past, and anything that we do here in the future. So, my name is Jonathan Mengistu. I'm one of the curators here, and all these lovely books are some of my selections. Please take a look, and if you have any questions, ask me or any of the other staff members, and we'll be sure to help you out with that and anything else that you need. So, a few quick rules of thumb before we get started. Of course, put your phones on silent or on vibrate, or just turn it down a little bit while we get this program going. That'd be great, just to make sure that we have a really fruitful discussion with no interruptions. If you happen to do any Q&A, you know what, make sure to keep the mic right around here if you're asking any questions. And so that's pretty much the rules of thumb for this particular program. So in terms of what we got going on here, a couple of things, recurring things. We do fundraising here. So we have 2 films by the founder of Sankofa, Haile Garima, coming out, Black Lions, Roman Wolves. We also have The Maroons, and both of these films are films that we're taking donations for, as well as for a building expansion project that we've got going on as well, because we want to make this place big, bigger and better for y'all. Make sure it's real nice, real spacious, so we can do bigger and better things. So we have those things going on, and of course we have regular events that we have here periodically. So on, let's see, November 15th, from 6:30 to 8:30, former Howard grad, I think from School of Comm, Jan Buckner Walker. She's going to be presenting a book of Black crosswords. Not very many books out there in terms of Black crossword puzzles. So this is a new one coming out. It's coming out through a major publisher, I think Simon & Schuster. It's going to be pretty cool. She has a second volume coming out later on in the spring. I think the intro is written by, I think Josh Johnson is the black guy off The Daily Show. I don't know, but that's all right. That's not bad at all. Shout out to our sister. We can't wait to see her for sure. Sunday, it's our flagship On Our Mind series. So here at Sankofa, we do something called On Our Mind. So it basically highlights the different things going on in the world, particularly focusing on 4 conflict regions. So we have Gaza, of course, we have Congo, we have Sudan, and this next one coming up will be for Haiti, and that's from 7 to 9 p.m. on Sundays. And so that's what's going to be going on this Sunday. But let me get out y'all way. Without further ado, I'd like to introduce to y'all Greg Thomas in conversation with the lovely Nikesha Breeze. Take it away.
Can you hear me? Everybody hear me in the back? Yes. Cool, great. So I want to give like a formal as well as informal introduction of our guest. I actually came into contact with her work first of all on Instagram, which is kind of crazy. And it includes this particular book work, or what will become the work of this particular book. I came across a poem, a blackout poem called Grandmother, right? That looks like this. And I was fascinated, and I even brought it to the Sankofa store here years ago. There was another series that was done here at the behest of Haile Garima. It was called the How to Read series, which I was fascinated by, and he asked me to do an event in that series on George Jackson, and also to incorporate Frantz Fanon. If you go down the hallway over here, you can still see the poster, How to Read George Jackson with Frantz Fanon. And I actually used this particular poem to make a point, given the fact that the book Soul Dead Brother by George Jackson was corrupted in an incredible way by editors, even though it's still incredibly powerful. at the same time. More than 200 pages were removed. The title was changed. His name as author was put into the subtitle like he's an object. One of the white women editors, who was a lawyer, changed some of the pronouns around to make it seem like he was writing to her, right? And not the world, all kinds of stuff, right? It's gonna come out, soon enough, like in a book. And so I was asking the question, how do we read this book, right? How do we get George Jackson out of this book that ended up being a corruption by external editors? And I used Nikesha Breeze's Blackout Poetry as a model for how to read. And how do we read martyrs and spirits, right, in text that they gave to us, right, but that didn't come to us in a pristine fashion. So you've already been here, thanks to that presentation and that work, and I've been using it in class when we studied Soul That Brother for a couple of years as well. And so I was struck by how she uses Instagram like a portfolio, right, as a way, in addition to a way to communicate in different ways with the rest of the world as an artist in particular. And then I was surprised to see the book project come out that we're going to talk a lot more about tonight. Depending on where you look, however, Nikesha Breeze has been described as an African diasporic, Afrocentric, and Afrofuturist interdisciplinary artist. You can already hear the Sankofa principle there in terms of past, present, and future. She is originally from Portland, Oregon. You know what I mean when I say originally, when you say Black people originally, right? On this side of the water, right? She comes to us from Portland, Oregon. She now lives and works in the high desert of the Taos, New Mexico region. Is that how you say it? Taos. On the unceded land of the Taos Pueblo people, right? So it's far and far away from the Gulf of settler America, right? She is an African American descendant of the Mende people of Sierra Leone and Assyrian American immigrants from Iran. Her work has been exhibited nationally as well as internationally, between here in North America and Ghana, for example, as well as across the globe. Her practice of art employs, in her words, multiple materials and methodologies that call upon ancestral memory and archival resurrection to revive stories long erased. And in so doing, she engages directly with themes of grief, sanctuary, power, presence, erasure, and visibility. This work has garnered lots of acclaim, and this is important for this caliber of work, right? It's important because the work deserves this acclaim, but it also means that this level of work is really, really undeniable, right? Given the radical value, the radical politics, right, and the radical consequences of it. So she has been featured in American Art Collector, Hyperallergic, Metalsmith Magazine, and of course, the dreaded New York Times. She's earned, right, the National Performance Network Creative Fund and Development Fund grant. She has also received the Jury 3D Grand Prize Award and the Contemporary Black Arts Award for the 2018 International Art Prize exhibition. And this was for her sculptural installation, 108 Death Masks, a communal prayer for peace and justice. That is a work that in 2024 was included in the permanent collection of the Equal Justice Initiative's Freedom Monument Sculpture Park in Montgomery, Alabama. It's one thing to see that work, like on her website, or to see photos like of the mask. It's another thing to see it mounted and exhibited in this incredible space, which also takes like another set of artistic skills, And I also love the fact that I think the first pinned post on her Instagram page is her setting this up wearing a keffiyeh, right, in Alabama at the park, right? So I shared that a lot when I was sharing the importance of her work. This evening, we will also discuss her amazing book project, A Mutiny of Morning, Reclaiming the Black Body from Joseph Conrad's A Heart of Darkness, which is the 21st century book text of the Howard University course that we have gathered here tonight, which is African American literature from 1940 to the present. And we're happy to have you. We're thrilled to have Nikesha Breeze and to start this conversation. So join me in welcoming her, in her travels down here today to greet us. Thank you.
Wow, that's such a beautiful introduction. Great, thank you. I feel very honored to be here in this incredibly iconic space that is in every way dedicated to the furtherance of Black literature, Black life, Black culture, and for the liberation, ultimately, of the diaspora across the world. So thank you so much, Hailey. Thank you so much, Maritu, thank you, Greg, thank you everyone who's made this space happen, all of you for filling it constantly. Thank you for having me. I'm incredibly excited to share the work today. We're gonna start with a film work that I created we started it in 2020. A group of collaborators and I began with this fundamental question around our reclamation of time. What does it look like for Black bodies to reclaim time? What does it look like for us to be able to claim space, to break these patterns of colonization with our bodies in space? We developed this work called Stages of Tectonic Blackness, and actually engaging with that idea of the tectonic plates, the slow movement of transformation that is happening constantly in the earth body. What does it look like for Black bodies to enter into that level of slow, deep, and profound transformation? What does it look like for us to listen to the stones? We talked about the blood in the stones, the bloods of our ancestors still there, and how we, as we move through the world, are constantly walking over the bodies of our people. How do we slow down and feel that? How do we get into our bones, the bones that we're walking on? And so the work of Stages of Tectonic Blackness emerged. And what that looked like was two movers, myself another dancer, and a viola player, composer, all Black, queer individuals. We had 3 different locations that we engaged over a number of years in this process. And what we would do was, for months, we would prepare by reading a number of texts. We would engage with Christina Sharp's In the Wake. We would engage with, we read A Million Black Anthropocenes or None by Catherine Yusoff. We read Fred Moten, we read Dion Brand, we read brilliant Saidiya Hartman, Scenes of Subjectivity. We read these books as fodder for our bodies, right? Actually moving it out of the intellectual space. We began in the intellectual space and then we translated that into the movement on the earth. And that we created these long, we call them durational mourning rituals, 12-hour dances where we didn't break. We didn't stop. There was nothing outside of the dance. Working in, our first was actually in a canyon in New Mexico that is traditionally a washout for the Los Alamos labs, which is, as many of you might know, Los Alamos was the place where they created the atomic bomb, and is still an active nuclear research space and site, and is constantly poisoning the lands in the deserts of New Mexico. And so we went as a way of acknowledging, honoring, and speaking to the land that's being currently poisoned by colonial interests. And in that space we danced, in that space we offered our Black bodies, to it. And so 12-hour dance, 12 hours of playing music, 12 hours of moving and praying into a space. That then moved into a new space. The film I'm going to show you is the second installation of Stages of Tectonic Blackness. And this was done inside. This was done as a part of my first solo show of my artwork. I created a show called 4 Sites of Return: remembrance, reclamation, reparation, and ritual. Each one of those elements was expressed through various art form. The 108 death masks honoring the millions of lives lost in enslavement, carved individually from clay. I created a boat made of etched copper. There's hundreds of plates of etched copper, all with Akan Adinkra from Ghana and Veve from the Voodoo traditions, African diasporic religious practices and prayers wrapping this copper boat as a vessel to return our bodies to themselves. I created a space of large-scale paintings honoring the first images made of African American people in the United States, as well as Mutiny of Morning, the very first iteration of this, what became a book, I installed in this show as a dissection. So as the book itself is dissecting all of the language of Joseph Conrad, the dissection of the book itself. So all of the pages of the book, I broke out into individual glass slides, as if you were in a science lab, and you take the slides of the story. So breaking it apart, pulling it apart, dismembering the work of the colonizer, and then bringing and highlighting these qualities of the Black bodies inside it, the brilliant Congolese people that were utilized inside that work. So this film that I'm going to start now is this 12-hour morning ritual, this 12-hour offering ritual done in the installation of 4 sites of return, utilizing and activating the copper boat, which I call the Ark of Return. So as you watch, you'll see various aspects, both of the show and my work as a whole, and also this deeper reclamation of language, prayer, ritual, and presence in the body. A few of the elements that you might also see in this film, or pieces that you won't see, but I'd be good to kind of hold in your mind, which I am excited just to share. The Ark of Return, the copper boat that you see inside, like I said, the back of it says return, and the title of the film is called Return, Remember. And that comes from this, which I'll just kind of do a little side story, just because I think you'll appreciate it. Some of you might know the story of Sarah Bartman, also called the Hottentot Venus. A tragic and painful story from the 1900s of a woman that was kidnapped from the Khoi people of South Africa. She was kidnapped and she was human trafficked into Europe, and she was functionally held in a cage, treated like an animal, and paraded around the bourgeoisie of the French elite. She had these men who were actually animal handlers that took her. Throughout that time, she was objectified and exotified, and they made many images of her body, her particular body shape with a large ass and breasts, and this beautiful form that was typical to other people became this grotesque form in the eyes of the colonizers as they exotified and objectified her. Sarah Bartman had a terribly tragic story. Throughout her life, she was treated in this way and animalized, and then close to her death, she was actually, there was a doctor who was wanting to examine her body as he was trying to prove this missing link between monkeys and humans. Of course, this grotesquerie of white science. He wanted to examine her physical body. She refused, which is a powerful, important part of the story, is her active and absolute refusal to have her body used and treated in this way. Unfortunately, 2 weeks after that refusal, she died of unknown causes. The doctor purchased her body and continued to do what he wanted. And in that, he dissected her, he proved his point of the missing link, and her body was then kept in the French Anthropological Museum on display as a non-human form. And it was kept until 2015, when Nelson Mandela and the Khoi women and families and communities all petitioned actively and worked to bring her body home. So many artists have addressed this story. Many artists have tried to portray her body in a beautiful way. Black women have made golden breasts and golden asses and tried to do phenomenal ways of acknowledging her story. But for me, I didn't want to perpetuate the objectification of her body. And as I thought of this story, I wanted to talk about her return. And so I learned about what happened when they brought her home. And in that process of bringing her home was probably the most beautiful story of all, was that and there's a small educational VHS you can find that shows this moment, but they brought her home in a box, in a crate, and when that box returned, all of the women of the community circled around it, and they laid a hand-quilted quilt over the body, or over the casket, the box, and they came with safety pins, and one at a time they pinned together on this fabric. They pinned a wholeness. They like literally held her together with these prayers and with these pins. One by one, they stitched her into a wholeness and prayed about her wholeness. And so that gesture of remembering the dismembered body became a really powerful point for me. Is what does it look like to remember our bodies? What does it look like to put us back together as we've been cut up, dissected, and objectified by the colonized system for so long? How can I remember the bodies of my community, the bodies of myself, my family? So to do that, I built this boat, which is what an artist does. I built a boat. I built a sacred place that was held specifically for the act of remembering. And that remembering and that sewing together came down to the most simple act of washing, touching, and carefully touching a Black body as a radical act, realizing that also in the world, we never see the slow, hours-long, careful touching of a Black body in public. That's something probably none of you have ever seen, right? We don't really see it in film. We don't see careful, slow touching of Black bodies in film. We don't see it, other than, again, exotification and over-sexualization of these bodies, but not just care. And so for me, to take a Black body into a space and just carefully touch them and wash them for hours is one of the most powerful things I could imagine. So I built an entire art installation just to do that, and just to do it in a sacred way. So this film, you'll be able to see the 12-hour, brought down to 20 minutes, presentation of that work.
Really enriching visually, and touching. And even from your introduction, I began to just look at all of these like literary connections, right? For example, special literatures, right? In fact, in class, I mentioned there's this line from Toni K. Bambara where she says the land is bloody and sacred,
Yes.
right? The land is bloody and sacred. And when you began to talk about dissection and this kind of reverse dissection on Conrad, I mean, that's what happened to revolting enslaved bodies, right? They were often sent to the dissector, right? That was the mass political equivalent of the Sarah Bartman story, which is like, where is Nat Turner's head right now, right? We're waiting for that. But this was, and in fact, the whole science of anatomy really grew like out of this in the Americas in particular. And the arc here, which is an incredible way to end the film with this word return, like on that structure, it made me think of Henry Dumas's, right? We read Fawn in class, but he also has a very famous short story called Ark of Bones that is also about a kind of return. He worked with Sun Ra a lot, right, as a literary artist and somebody who was killed on a subway train in New York, before his time, and becomes an inspiration for Toni Morris's literature, for example. So there's that. And I'm thinking about Ayikwe Armah as well in other ways. And I believe we just heard that your project in Australia is called Remembering, is that right?
Yeah, it's a part of, the Sydney Biennale's Remembering from Toni Morrison.
Remembering from Toni Morrison. We actually read The Site of Memory in class, right? And someone started talking about the equivalences already before we found this new piece of information already. They were like, wow, this is amazing. That was Halima. And then this reference to boats too, right? Because we're learning more and more still about maritime marinage, right? We have this book now called If We Must Die, about shipboard insurrections and the amazing history of that, which literally like overturns everything we were ever told about the Middle Passage, right? That we arrived defeated, right? And also without personhood and without any kind of Africanity, and yet there were so many revolts, and some even returned home successfully, etc. So everything we were told, right? And everything behind the de-Africanization thesis that produces Negroes was a lie, right? And it's been overturned by this. And there's a new book now that just came out, I believe, this year, that actually talks about how what we refer to as the Underground Railroad was sexually aided by ships, right? And black seamen, right? And what have you. And so there's actually like this very strong connection between maritime marronage, if you will, right? And even the little thing that we've come to try to call the Underground Railroad, like on the land. And so when you also are talking about boats here, all these connections, right, come through. The imagery also kind of suggests connections with Daughters of the Dust, right, as well. And I'd be interested in like hearing more what others have to say about it ultimately too, but thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really, again, just to share the layers of this work and just to hear you also reflect on so many pieces that just, they get embedded in a work like this that, you know, again, you can see there's, for me, that's one of the most important things as an artist, especially with so many various materials, is that intentionality where, you know, and it's that intertextuality really, where every single aspect of the work is consciously referring to something and is holding a particular ground that no one ever sees. And I think that's one of the pieces that I talk about a lot, is this idea of the iceberg, right? Where we have, as artists and as people, this building of this phenomenal resource underneath us, and just that little tip is what we offer to the world, right? And beginning to recognize that that also is a form of resistance to these systems that actually push us towards giving everything we have before we've had a chance to deepen it and grow it in the world, right? The overproduction, over-capitalization of everything, you know, also comes into these layers of creative process and the depths that work can actually, again, you can feel the work, even if we never knew any of these references, you feel it inside it because it's there. Time is one of our most powerful and valuable assets for that.
And the way you introduced the whole concept of care, right, as a theme here and a mission, to see it visually play out this way was also very, very, very impressive, right? Because on the one hand, there was some kind of evocation, right? So when I see the care, you know, to the black body here in the film, I think one way we can relate to it to some extent is through like childbirth, right? When I see the bodies like prone, like and attended to. And then the other time we might get a hint of it is also like in death and burial, right? But not in between, as you said, right? So in the film we get to envision this care, right, and attention, healing attention, right, to the body that's not simply about the moment like of birth, right, and not simply about the death and preparation for the afterlife or burial, but instead like everyday like care. And that was like really, really powerful as well, right? And to even offer as like a model, like what happens if we treat all of our living bodies with the same sort of care and attention that we do to the birthed body, right, or the deceased body.
Exactly, and that there's there's an artist in the West Coast. His name's Jason. I'm trying to remember his last name. It's jumping out of my mind, but he created this project called Chronically Undertouched, and it's specifically about Black men and how Black men as a whole are critically undertouched. We as a society have, you know, and Black bodies in general are so, from these histories of enslavement, from all of these histories of exploitation, you know, have been over-sexualized and undertouched and under-cared for and undertouched. And that, I think, is something that, every single day we can reclaim our bodies by those simple acts of care, of conscious, slow, and intentional care for each other and for ourselves.
The other reference I left out, I kept hearing the word remedy, right, and different variations of it, right, and that's a key word. I just did some interviews with this guy in Italy who's a bookseller, and I wanted to interview him about George Jackson and his encountering of George Jackson's writing from Italy, right, as anti-fascist connection, and he actually has his own tradition of publishing like tiny versions of books. Like I can't even see anything about like books the size of a credit card, right? And his word for them in Italian translates to remedy, or like a pill.
Yeah.
And I thought this was interesting too because when you do read Soul Dead Brother, that word remedy keeps popping up, and he talks about facing what we need to face, right? And admitting, right, that we were taken as prisoners of war. Right, and that we've been wounded and we are in this position and that there's no problem like admitting this because once you recognize this, you can start to work on the remedy, right? A very famous passage. And I was hearing echoes of that here too. And that's what tradition, right, is all about, to see these convergences, ones that are known, unknown, conscious, unconscious, intended and conspiratorial, right, or encountered, by kismet, at the same time. And that's what, is so powerful about tradition in general and Black tradition for sure.
Yes. And I think I want to segue into talking about the book as well. So, and I think on this theme of care and the specificity, right? So for me, Mutiny of Morning, this book was a really unique book, actually, ultimately for me, of self-care, which is interesting. I carried this book that I found a used copy in a box, a free box of books on the street. And it was already kind of marked up from somebody's class they probably took on it and that they weren't reading and they were doodling in the edges and things like this. And I immediately when I saw it, of course I knew the book, and there's like almost an anger. It is an anger. When I saw it, I was just like, that fucking book still exists? Excuse my language. But that, I was just like, this book, and it's sitting here free. Like I wanted to like not have anyone ever read it or see it. And even my taking it was sort of a getting it out. Getting out of the circulation. And I put it in my bag, and of course, there's some part of me that wanted to destroy it intuitionally. And I actually, the page that has it all, cut out was one of the first ones. Because I was still kind of listening and thinking and working through this blackout vision. Basically, I took the book and I started to use it as a space to, not even to vent the energy that was happening. Like I wanted to come in with a knife and just cut up this language. And that was the first intentional feeling. And that to me also is a form of care. There was something in the book and in myself that was like wanting to cut away all of the colonial thickness to get to the root of something, right? It didn't work just to destroy it. There was another type of precision that needed to happen. And so the book became this place for me to come in and to pull out my knives, if that makes sense. And to work through the all of the thickness that was happening and is constantly happening in the world, the constant violence that is happening, the constant, pain of ongoing genocide is there. And so the years of working and holding this book became like a moment of refuge because I had some power and some agency in my extraction, in my reappropriation. And I didn't work in order in the book. I just kept it in my bag. And like I said in the beginning, I talk about the rules. For me, whenever I enter a work like this, any of the works, I have to, in order also to keep myself safe, there's this place, again, our ancestors are not dangerous, but our work with them has to be conscious and careful and measured in a way so that we don't fall into our own romanticism, ultimately, right? The romantic ideas that come up when we think about enslavement, the ideas that we've been brainwashed about, the horrors and the, there's so many layers of our own unlearning that have to happen ultimately when we come into dealing with historical reclamation work, archival work, ancestral work. And in that unlearning process, there is this specificity that's necessary. And so for me, that takes the form of ritual, that takes the form of making like really clear rules, Like all of our spiritual practices have very clear rules. You can't do this, you have to do that, you have to, like take this particular offering or this particular, cloth over your head or this particular thing that you bring to the altar. And so I created a series of rules so that I could enter the work with a clear mind, clear heart, clear spirit, and then good relationship with the ancestors. And so that meant that I would, like I said in the rules, if I found my brain wandering into the wilds of Joseph Conrad's writing, like that white mind, I had to get the hell out of there as fast as possible. Literally, I had to shut the book down. I had to go walk away from it. I had to let it cleanse itself in the spirit before I came back, right? And so I watched myself. If I, and sometimes it was, I would just open the book and I would see a word and I would just put a box around it. I would cut it out, almost like making a little raft for that voice to hold, right? And then I would witness and watch and see, another one that would come and another. And as I said in the beginning too, I tried not to ever create go to the end and try and make a poem. Again, like moving away from all impositional thinking. Like I'm not here to come in and be the artist that is going to take this work and make the story. I have to wait for it to come to me. I have to wait for those words to come. I have to wait for the body, is how I spoke it, the body to reveal itself, the being to reveal itself. So each poem was a negotiation with a spirit that was moving across the page, that was actively navigating through the expanse of the white colonized words there to emerge. And my job was to be as clear as possible to follow it. And so that is also like this foundational form of care, taking the time, taking the space, making clear boundaries, which are all acts of care, to be able to receive what was being asked.
We live in this like neoliberal age of like super decadent capitalism now, where everything is commodified, including like this grotesque atomization of identity, right? Like down to like now we're all there are no people, there's no community, there's just like singularity, to become like a commodity. Like I am this and I'm the only one like this and this is my claim like to public attention and here's the barcode like for it. And now give me a grant and a nonprofit and name me after someone. In the same way that, we have artistic and intellectual and political ancestors who are reduced to icons now. And the old model for this was like Che Guevara. Like Che Guevara is not a t-shirt, sold at Target. That's not Che Guevara, right? But now that treatment has gone all over the place at this particular point, and where people who should be martyrs and spirits and ancestors are now like icons in the narrow capitalist sense for sale, and they become part of a whole commodity process, right? So now people want to be artists in order to be famous. People want to be artists in order to be enriched and to get, like attention. So this model of like patience, right, of anti-capitalist art, right, of anti-commodification art, but you're still gonna end up producing the best stuff, ironically, right, in that particular way, is important. And it's saying a lot. And I thought it was interesting too when we read the author's preface where she says, don't read Conrad, right? Instead, this is what I did, this is my technique. That was like really, really interesting as well, because a lot of the times people do, if they want to do blackout poetry because it's a trend, they do rush it. And it's a style, right? And it looks so, like forced or whatever. And it's really about the outcome and where you're going to take the outcome and how what it's going to do for you. And so to see that in the preface and to hear like your technique, like take your time, don't rush it, walk away from it, that it's actually not something to sell or to enhance your reputation, right? This process at all, it stands out and it's very important. And the way you describe it, it also sounds like a kind of divination.
Yeah.
At the same time, like what the West would talk about in terms of like a Ouija board, right? In a classic Western sense, but also there's a process of like, I need to feel and find and commune like with the spirit, and something else will come out. And this is why so many of the poems don't read as blackout poems. They read as something that was created, right, in a very, very special place on its own. It's hard to believe that there ever was a Conrad when you read so many of these poems. It's just out of this world.
Yeah, I love that. I really want to hear y'all's questions and thoughts too, because I know that there's so many amazing students and folks who have read these poems in the book, and so I know we'll get to that. I don't know where our time is, right now, but yeah, the actual work, the poems in this book are, I'm gonna say it like I'm not the artist, because I'm, in a way, I'm not. Like I didn't really do anything but attend to these voices that were already here. So when I see and read these poems myself, I'm like, dang, that's good. Like,
Right.
who are you? Like, there's some that I read over and over again. Even when I was just here today, I was like trying to mark a few that I really loved, and I was almost brought to tears a few times by the poems in here, because I read them in a new way that I'd never read them, or like the beings that were in them spoke to me, and I was like, dang, this is so beautiful. Like, really profoundly beautiful, a few of these places, and this is not an ego trip. Like, I really feel so disconnected actually as an artist from this, because the work itself stands on its own. The voices are really powerful. So I am very excited to hear some of y'all's thoughts and commentary on what you've read and open the conversation up.
Okay. Do you want to read it before we switch to the
I
Q&A?
can, yeah.
That'd be good.
I was laughing because I was trying to pick out the ones that I really liked. And I think every other page on this book now is earmarked. So I'll just open it. You'll see too, there's no edits. There's only some of the poems, there'll be moments where I'll catch a word and then it doesn't actually work. It only happened a few times, but you look, when you see the page, you'll see I've like crossed out maybe 1 or 2 words in a poem. But the ones that just come like smooth water, they have the words just came, one, done. This was one of those. This poem was one of the ones that really stopped me in my tracks when it emerged. And it was close to the beginning of the process, and it's called A Black Death. The familiar wrenching, hands clutched just below the ribs, gripping something precious. From the depths, a tremulous wail, then silence. A black death. This one also, this one is really interesting, and there are some of the poems in here that have this edge, like a rough edge. Maybe it's that same kind of anger, the fire that was in the book when I picked it up. Still here. This poem holds some of that. It's called The People of the Swallowed. The whites, discomposed faces, grunting phrases, a flash of sharp teeth. Eat 'em. Countless. They belonged to the beginning. A piece of paper down the river. Some rotten meat. You can't breathe dead existence. They were the people of the swallowed, the half-cooked sustenance, the gnawing hunger. They were men with the capacity to weigh the consequences. Let me see if I can find one of the beautiful ones. This is called The Last Remarkable Edge. I remained dark earth. They buried me. I remained mysterious knowledge with nothing underfoot. Great, still wisdom. The last remarkable edge. Remarkable expression. A commingling of pain and sincerity compressed into the invisible. These ones, there's a few throughout of this elegant, beautiful power. There's these beings that are in here that shine really brightly with this sense of self-possession and this sense of absolute power in the face of everything else. And this one has this powerful, still, great wisdom inside it. And yeah, I wanted to call that one out too. So,
like, even when I was in graduate school at Berkeley, I had a class that was in anthropology. It was an ethnography class. It was supposed to be on this, that, and the other. It happened to be in anthropology, but I would have to walk through, right, some of their anthropological museums and the buildings to get the class. And it always felt like, I don't know who could be hanging up on the wall here.
yeah.
And you see that also, like, if you read Leslie Silko, she talks about what happens when Native Americans go and see, like, what are reduced to artifacts that actually have great spiritual power and resonance for them, and sometimes they'll be in tears, right? If you read Almanac of the Dead by Leslie Marmon Silko, like, you know, it's a literal capture in captivity, like, of ancestral spirits, like, in peoplehood there, that are just seen as museum objects here. And there might be like a corollary here between what you're doing with this blackout poetry agenda of liberation of spirits from the literature of Conrad, and what we can experience in terms of, you know, museums, especially now that we've been talking about repatriation.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, and that's also what I said in part of in my film, was that, like, our reclamation begins with the return of our bodies, like our bodies back to ourselves, and that's not only our physical bodies, but
Right.
all of our bodies, our spiritual bodies, our artifacts, our pieces, our gestures,
Right.
our image, our stories have to be returned to us. They have been taken, stolen, you know, and displayed on the world stage in every single aspect of the world. They have taken something from African culture
Right.
and have commodified it. And so it is a repatriation process, all of this.
But that includes literature and not just the official institutions of the museum, and that's really striking.
Exactly, the language, yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would love to hear y'all's voices out here, if we're ready for that.
Do we have a mic for Q&A?
I see hands.
Hi, my name's Elle. I wanted to ask you to repeat something.
Yes.
Could you tell me what you said about the 4 sites of return? You said there were 4 elements, right?
Yes. The 4 sites of return are ritual, remembrance, reparation, and reclamation. And each one of those I came to, even though they all kind of start with R, which is an interesting thing, but that wasn't necessarily intentional. It was actually like, those are the words. Those are the things, those are the ones. And it's this but through my practice, I was really saying, what is it that I keep circling around? What are the things that I keep touching again and again and again? And those were them. In one way or another, my work is touching one of those sites.
And then this book project has reclamation as the subtitle.
Yes, exactly.
You saw more hands in the back? Okay. Alima? You know.
I think there was actually someone before we
That's Ivana.
Yes. Hi, my name is Ivana. I just wanted to add some commentary to your book. I really thought you did an amazing job with the work, especially like how you really like changed the meaning of the black body, the black soul, the black mind, and how you like really emphasize reclaiming our soul from like the darkness of the white colonialism that we've been brought into. And I like how you really highlighted the experience of our ancestors and how they lived through us, and all the symbolism and things like that. I really like that that you did with the work.
Thank you so much. It's that's absolutely what I'm hoping we can do, right? It is that place of, calling it back. There's Fred Moten talks about fugitivity in music, and the ways that the like jazz music, is evading form, is evading the ultimately the colonized structures, right? And I see this work also in the way that the words jump and move and flow across the page as a form of jazz, like as a form of also, moving through the abyss of the whiteness of the actual page itself, right? So each step is navigating fugitively through this space to arrive.
Okay. All right, Halima.
Hi. Hello. My name is Halima, and just like Ivana said, I'm a very much big fan of your work, and what you began this the film and this meeting with saying how we don't really see at all the careful touching of a black body, of black bodies in general. And through your film and through reading your book in class, I have seen both of these practices, and I do agree, I've not seen this before in my years of schooling, education, my experiences. So I really do appreciate the work that you do, the physical work and the literary work, and the spiritual work. So I have so many questions, genuinely. I have a whole entire doc up right now. But the one question I really, really wanted to ask you was that you mentioned in your book, you pull these themes of earth, mud, trees, water, wind, all these earth themes. And I wanted to ask you, what do you believe the spirits of the people who you are listening to about these? What do you believe their connection is with the earth, and what do you believe our connection is to the earth?
I love that question. I believe that the earth longs for us. I believe that the earth itself, and that we long for it. Our bodies are made of earth. We are of this earth. We aren't separate from it. We are made of the elements that the earth is made of. And everything in colonialism, everything in capitalism, everything in white supremacy would try to separate you from that. The earth is one of the most powerful things that we have. It is our mother. It is the life force of everything. And the more we can connect with and feel with and be with the earth and the planet itself, the more power we have. The more disconnected we are from that, the more easily we are able to be controlled, separated, and isolated. And so Black bodies relating to, returning to, and being in relationship with the earth in all of its forms is incredibly necessary and powerful for our liberation. And so, those bringing those themes in and around and navigating with that in the work and physically and in the literature is also hopefully a reminder to all of us that we are earth, that the earth needs you and wants you back, wants you to be in touch with it, and is here for us to hopefully and eventually and absolutely overcome our oppressors.
Hi again, my name is Sonia. As a reader who appreciates imagery, I got that a lot from your book, and now having a better understanding of your intention behind your book. So my question is, for poems that were shorter, like My Friend, and this idea of reclaiming and emphasizing the themes of using grief and storytelling to emphasize reclaiming, when were you okay to step away from knowing that you gave that message, or knowing that there's a message within there without having to say a lot or without having to pull a lot from the original text?
I love that question, because there are, and the fact that you pulled that poem, My Friend, out, that was one of the ones that hit me like a stone when it happened. Like I actually, my body dropped down in my gut with that one, and there were no more words that could come. And I think there's that, where it's the poems became such a relationship that for some of them, when it was said, it was said. And me and the poem sort of looked at each other like, yeah, that's it. yeah, you can actually see it on the page when you see it, that it stopped there. There's that blackout moment was done. The poem is called My Friend, and it says, was that body hanging, my friend? Yeah. That's it. There's so much that comes up in that. Like, immediately we all are conjured to these places of terror that have lived inside of our ancestral bodies. And these moments of helplessness, these moments of fear. You know, there's one of the first pieces of art I ever did, one of my very, very first paintings before I ever would even have called myself an artist. I painted these paintings in my bedroom and never showed them to anyone, just because the images were in my head. I couldn't stop seeing the images in my head, and I had to get them out. They're powerful. The series I ended up calling Within This Skin, because they lived in my skin. And one of the images was this beautiful forest, like morning, early morning, just the sunlight coming through at like daybreak, you know, and those long streaks of light that go through the little dusty, you know, quality in the fresh air. And I saw this forest and this golden light coming through and these huge trees, and as I walked into the clearing in my mind, there is this solitary figure of a hanging man. And he was in clothes a little too big, you know, a little unfit, and not old enough to be, you know, a father, but just this man, and in the gorgeous sunlight. And that's how this poem sits with me.
Zoe. This is a lynching poem, and yeah, Zoe. So Zoe, you don't have to ask a question, but she brought up something like really incredible in class when she was reading The Lone Negro, and she dug up a connection with Ida B. Wells. So can you ask her? Great.
Please.
Okay. Hi, my name is Zoe. Let me pull up my notes really quick. Okay, so in the poem, called The Lone Negro, found it. So I looked up the Lone Negro on Google, because I was like, what does that mean? And I found a quote from Ida B. Wells that says, I'd rather go down in history as one lone Negro who dared to tell the government that it had done a dastardly thing than to save my skin by taking back what I said. So I was just wondering, like, what the connection between that was with that quote and the title.
Wow.
Can you read the quote again?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
She says, I'd rather go down in history as one lone Negro who dared to tell the government that it had done a dastardly thing than to save my skin by taking back what I said.
Save my skin. Yeah. And we are in the age of, you know, recanting. The press conference. The Zionist pressure, no, you know, and what have you. Like, I take it back, you know, and what have you. And then that puts you in the clutches, right, of these folks forever and what have you. So it's a very good time to hear Ida B. Wells.
Yeah, no, it's so powerful. And again, these, like, that type of voice, that is the voice of, our sovereignty, of our power. Like, I would rather be that lone Negro standing and speaking my mind and speaking my heart and speaking towards what is needed to be said, you know, than to not say it. And so I think that there is a power. I was trying to find the poem so that we could read it together. Does anyone know what page it's on? What page, people? Rose?
I don't know that.
Oh, there it is. I see it. 69.
She actually knows it. She just doesn't want to show her powers.
Gosh, it is so beautiful. I'll read it and then answer your question a little better. I am a dream of bewilderment in a tremor of existence. Impossible existence, subtle and penetrating, as if reflecting pitch dark. Awake, I listened to the night air, leaning against the moon. I was the heaven I wanted. In that grove of death, the lone Negro in cotton. I feel in this poem the same self-possession that Ida B. Wells is talking about. That place, and again, visually, I see this young man, this young person, maybe not a man, this person, in the moonlight, literally in the moonlight, holding the immensity of their body, of their skin, of their presence. I am the heaven. I was the heaven I wanted, right? Like the power of that, to call forth within oneself all of the promises, ultimately of the Christian God, right, that is also being imposed on Black bodies in these particular ways, right? To say, I am that. I was the heaven I wanted, right? I am a dream of bewilderment in a tremor of existence, right? This place, bewilderment, actually connects us again to the earth, to be wild, you know, to return to this. Bewilderment is understood colloquially as a kind of confusion, but it's actually talking about the wilds of nature, the twisted roots and brambles of the earth, right? And there's also a freedom in that. There's a nonconformity in that, right? So I am a dream of bewilderment. I'm a dream of freedom. I'm a dream of wild actualization of self in a tremor of existence. In this moment that is literally tremulous, in this moment that is unstable, in this world that is, you know, shaking, moving, unbound. I am this dream. And so there's a power in it that I think is very much aligned with Ida B. Wells' idea of the lone Negro. So it's a beautiful connection there.
Yes. Other questions?
Yes.
Okay. Ebenezer?
Hi. I really like what you said earlier about what do you call it? Being like a vessel for like your art, for your poems, like having it like take a life out, like about itself. And like I thought it was crazy because like last week I was talking to my friend about like how it's like a million like people on like Instagram, they claim to be poets, but it's like the most like fake deep like pseudo intellectual stuff they post. So it's like I was like, oh my god, like they just like saying a whole bunch of nothing. So I was like, oh my god, like this is it. Like you let yourself be like a vessel for the art. Like kind of on that topic. Now, since you said like you don't like want to rush your art, like how are you able to like differentiate like patience versus like stagnation?
Great question. That is a really great question. Patience is still moving. Patience is moving very slowly, very carefully. Patience is awake and conscious. I think when we think of stagnation, there's a unconsciousness to it. There's a quality of denial or it's like not wanting to look at or feel or move. This stagnation is something that is stuck in itself, right? It circles in itself, but it can't move. But patience is moving. Patience is more like a glacier. You know, patience is like the tectonic plates. You know, patience is a profound like quality of movement that is moving from a wider and more horizontal space, right? So we can think about like these Instagram poets and these people who are like just, you know, going off the top of their emotional, you know, like thing. It's like they're getting an idea and putting it out right away. There's this very linear and sort of vertical, you know, and isolated way of presenting, right? And I think for ourselves, you can sort of assess where things are coming from by even thinking of it in that way, right? Like, am I getting something and putting it straight out? Am I thinking of this experience as an isolated experience, my idea, my thought? Am I, you know, is there a particularity to it that is isolated? Or is there a feeling in the work that you're bringing out into the world that feels horizontal, that feels connected, kind of beyond your own periphery? You know, is there a press of that feeling coming from behind you or on the side of you, right? These types of physical relationships, like actually it's like somatic understanding is the word of it, helps you to ground and know where your work is coming from, where your ideas are coming from. You won't get that feeling of a push from behind unless you have filled, in a way, your coffers. You filled yourself with something that builds a pressure, right? And that comes from your research, that comes from your reading, that comes from your engaging and your listening. Those things build pressure in the body, and they'll physically push you forward in your work. But when there's a sense of grasping or a sense of thinness or a sense where you're trying to imagine something and you kind of have to like jump on Google to get some idea, or you have to like, if it feels like it's hard to get and it's thin, it hasn't grown roots, right? And you're gonna just pop it off and it's not gonna go anywhere. So there's a layer of honesty that comes into recognizing and discerning between what is patience and what is stagnation by feeling into where, like, is there a movement happening, or am I stuck inside, or am I just working off the top of my head? Does that make sense? Like, again, the honesty is about slowing down enough to really truly listen to what it is you're bringing out. Right? If you're trying to write, you're trying to make music, you're trying to make art, you're trying to do whatever it is you're doing, slow down enough to actually begin to hear where it's coming from and how you're building back that foundational pressure underneath, that foundational iceberg, right? So that when it actually comes out, it's effortless. Mm-hmm. It's effortless because it's being pushed from some place that is not even you anymore, right? You're being pushed by it instead of pushing it.
I mentioned Leslie Soko and her novel Almanac of the Dead. It took her 10 years to write that. And when she finished it, she said, you know, I'm gonna look up and I wonder, like, how many more friends do I still have, you know, after all this time, and what's gonna happen now? And I was in graduate school at Berkeley when she started touring and giving readings, like, of the novel. And she came to Black Oak Bookstore in North Berkeley, which was supposed to be this big hippie haven, and they were completely hostile, right, to her. They could not stand her treatment of colonialism, you know, at all. They were hostile to her. And I went with a friend of mine who was from Arizona, right, another Black graduate student, but who was from Arizona and was really connected with the book because a lot of it's anchored in the Southwest. And we were just the only two Black people in this audience, some like older, rich, white hippies, right, who were hostile to her, right? And I'll never forget that she walked up to the podium and she threw her head up, like she didn't want to have to look at them. And from this moment on, she looked at me and Dawn for the rest of the talk. But she opened by throwing her head up and she said, to quote Zora Neale Hurston, and I was like already floored, right? A Native American woman, right, who steps to the podium in this hostile white hippie audience. It says, first words out of her mouth, to quote Zora Neale Hurston, and she finished, I was the horse the ancestors rode in on. You know, and so that's like, this work isn't me. And it's not individualism, it's not capitalism, it's not celebrity or stardom, right? And therefore it's not rushed and it's not thin, and it does tap into something and channel something.
Exactly, that's it.
Halima.
Hello. So this was
Back.
I'm back. This was the first question that I came up with when I was reading the work that you pulled. Short version, what did this work do for your soul? long version, because like in my mind the spectrum of soul can be like uplifted, given life, purpose, rejuvenation, and on the other side it can be like taken away from and like worn out, drained, saddened, or darkened. Did the process of doing this blackout poetry uplift or take more of a toll on your soul? And I remembered that you said this was the most spiritual work you've done so far, and that it really goes into also like the second part of that question, which is from the interactions you've had with the people who have read this work, what has it done for their soul and spirit?
Well, I'd have to ask you all what it's done for your soul and spirit. I want to know, and I have asked others too. But for me, it was definitely uplifting. I didn't feel drained by this work. Some of my work, I have had that experience of getting a type of draining, a type of tiredness, a type of feeling that was not all mine. I like to think it. With this work, probably because I took so much time. It took me over a year to do it. It's not that many pages, but it took me over a year, slowly, carefully, especially when it was like if I read, I have to put it down for days, like all of that built into being a long time. And so every time I entered the book again, it felt like sort of coming into this world that I made, right? I would come in as a guest back into the book when I'd open it, and like I was a visitor in it, right? And so I never felt drained. I would come into it very humbly, and would leave with a gift, right? Like every time a poem was completed, it felt like I was given something really beautiful to hold and cherish after that. And so, yeah, each time it was like coming to the house of my elders and, they giving me some sweet tea, so I left feeling filled up. And I hope that people, when they read these, that they might have some similar experience where as they enter into each of the poems, there's a calling in them. They kind of call you in, they pull you in, and they build on you, and and like you said, it's surprising that they came out of the text, and so there's this relationality that happens. So I'm hoping that as you gain relationships with these people in here, that they also will fill you up, that you come away feeling, even when they're hard, even when some of the poems are like dark and painful, that even then you recognize that there's a loving care that these people, that they had to say it. Does that make sense? And you being the person to read it, then you complete the equation, right? The spirits have to say this thing, and it's hard, because it is hard. It was hard. And your receiving of that, your holding of that and cherishing of that poem then becomes like a closure for it, right?
It's going to be a trip if you take a class where Conrad is assigned in the future after reading this book. That's going to be a trip. We get to the next question. Could you talk about moving from exhibition to publication, finding a publisher, and the whole public domain question here in terms of reproducing the Conrad book on the left side?
For sure. So the Conrad book is in the public domain. It's because it was produced before the copyright laws, and so it is fair use. You can use the work, you can reproduce the work. So that was just kind of acknowledging, learning a little bit about how to work with the copyright. And it is drastically changed, although you can still read the book. It's still changed enough as a work of art. The poems themselves, what's actually published out of it, is a radical enough change to be what's called a derivative. Publishing, I self-published, and my first publishing of it was self-published. So I actually did all of the design and layout for this book. I worked with InDesign and my own publishing stuff, and I did all of the line breakouts and everything for the entire book. So I made it all. And then I started by just printing it, just self-publishing and printing it and having it available at my first art show as sort of an additional part of the art. But then there was, a lot of people who really loved it. I also really loved it, and there was this question of, well, this should be actually published. How do we figure that part out? And I actually connected with your friend and comrade, who is a social doctor and radical individual that's been, it's like a side story, is actually giving me a house in New Mexico right now to do work for the community. But this comrade was able to connect me with a Kenyan and Canadian press, because that was also important to me as well, is to make sure that the book would go into good hands. And so it's a press called Daraja Press that works specifically with radical abolitionist texts and texts that are across the African diaspora, really mostly focusing on African authors and authors working with radical social change. And so this was their first book of poetry in this press. Again, they mostly did a nonfiction, and they had a whole manifesto series called Moving Beyond Capital Now, or Racial Capitalism Now, I think is the long title. And so this book kind of got published underneath that as a form of against racial capitalism. And because I had made the entire book myself, it was kind of a non-traditional publishing situation, because the publisher normally will make the book for you, and that's partly how they get half of their fees or whatever, but I already did all of that. So I decided and proposed to co-publish. So I made my own publishing press called Black Godex Press, and co-published with Daraja. So
what's the name again?
Black Godex Press.
Okay.
Yeah. And so you'll see that on the back of the book too. So it's basically co-published by me and Daraja Press.
And the title, A Mutiny of Morning, I got stuck for a moment where I misread morning as MOURNING for the longest. And only when we went to order the book for our class did it self-correct for me. It was like an optical illusion mistake. And I was wondering if you could talk about the selection of the title and that kind of homonym, kind of double entendre of morning and morning.
And that's it. I mean, that I think is the thing, is this whole book is actively pulling out and utilizing language as with multiple forms. And so I too have many times read it in my mind as a mutiny of morning. And I think it is in a way both, right? The poem, did you find the poem it came from?
Yes. Not yet.
You have
Yes.
it? Yeah, let me pull it up, because it's actually quite beautiful. There.
It's just like grandmother, because I know grandmother from Instagram, but it's under a different title in the book.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm going to read the poem, and it's beautiful. It's called The Least Bit of Shade and Water. A caravan spreading over the empty land, a solitude traveling on the road. Day after day behind me, a great silence around and above, a sound as profound as the body of a Negro. The least bit of shade and water, like a mutiny of morning. I think of this, a mutiny, so mutiny, right, is like a rebellion, right? We think of the mutinies on the ships. So that's also very much inside. But a mutiny of morning, what is that, right? A mutiny of morning, how does that work? As I've read it and deepened with it, and I think what I meant as I pulled those words was this, Mike is funny, this rebellion of light, this rebellion of the rising sun. I think of the Black bodies that have arisen in this text as mutineers, right? They are rebelling against the colonization of Conrad, the rebelling against the framing, and the thickness of the colonized mind that is here. These bodies are rebelling. They actually are pushing up out of the text. Their hands, their bodies, their stories are pushing up in these cutout words, right? And that is the mutiny, right? So it is a mutiny of mourning, a mutiny of a new day, the rebellion of our light against the darkness of colonization. And so when the rest of that poem, it says, a sound as profound as the body of a Negro. Again, this place, this understanding of the profundity of our bodies, the profundity and the way that, to explain something as powerful as the body of a Negro, is, again, as a radical way of reappropriation of that word, use that language.
And I think one of the reasons why I sort of miscued and heard the double entendre with mourning is there is an association between mutiny and M-O-U-R-I-N-G, right? Because, and this is what I like most about reading about the Denmark Vesey and Gullah Jack, conspiracies like in the Carolinas, right? They were so afraid that slave revolts would have sequels, that there would be this banning of wearing black or any manifestation of mourning, because that's an identification with the now condemned, right? And a continued threat, even when all this propaganda that says the threat is over, right? Or it never really existed, you overestimate it, but the fear of the mutiny continues and is seen in the act of mourning itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. And it is because we have to reclaim our grief also, like our capacity to mourn, our right to mourn. Right? That's one of the things that we see happening in Israel, right?
Yes.
With
Yes.
in Palestine,
Yes.
with Palestinian people being denied the right to mourn,
Right.
the ability to mourn and to bury and to hold and to acknowledge their bodies.
Even to get the bodies back.
Even to get the bodies back.
Yeah.
Again, this I want my body back.
Right.
Right? This is a refrain again and again. So a mutiny of mourning also is a rebellion towards the erasure of our mourning and our process and practices of grief and our ways of expressing and returning ourselves to ourselves.
Absolutely. Questions? Okay. All right, you can start here and then in the back.
Hi, my name is Asia, and I didn't have a question. It was more of an observation that like the wilderness in like the poems or like how you perceive it kind of comes across to me as the spiritual world, especially when you were talking about like the painting that you had in your head of like the forest, and it usually represents like crossroads between death and spirit or like transformation. And was that intentional, like the wilderness kind of being represented as like the spiritual world, or it just kind of came about?
Yes, I agree, I believe, and I think that intention then does flow through the book. You'll see there's so many places in the book that I do bring these ideas of the wilderness, of nature, like into the body of the work. And like you said, that threshold and crossroads space, that's something that comes again and again and again in Black literature and in our reclamation thinking, right? We have existed on these thresholds, right? The threshold, the Christina Sharp talks about it in the wake, living in the wake of the histories of enslavement and transatlantic slave trade, the literal waves of the water, right? These are also threshold spaces. Right? There's the space, the space between land and water, the space between, right? And so over and over again, these like themes of nature and crossroad spaces are intertwined because they think that they are, right? I believe they are, and that is foundationally a spiritual understanding, right? There's a Orisha that is Eshun, who is, the god at the crossroads, right? And there's so many offerings also to Eshun here, because that is the place where we are transferring between life and death. We are living in these realms of violence and dispossession, yet at the same time reclaiming our power in those places, right? The thresholds might be the most powerful place, for Black bodies to live and to share. Right? And like the Afro, even when I talk about my work as Afrofuturist, I'm actually talking about that threshold space. I'm talking about that space where the work is denying the linear ideas of time. You know, where I believe that the work we're doing in the present to acknowledge, heal, and you know, bring light to these experiences in the past of our ancestors actually does shift and heal our futures, right? Like we are able to change our pathways and even our present lives by working with the things that happened in the past. They aren't just back there. You know, I actually, this is just very quick, I did a talk one time, it was like this MIT, MacArthur fellows, I don't know, there's this kind of all these very, very, very smart people. They invited me as like the token artist to like talk, and they're all, there's like MacArthur geniuses, that's what it is, they're actual geniuses. And I went to this thing and started talking about Afrofuturism, and I gave this idea of time, and I said, often when we think of time, you know, our Western thinking would have you, if you were to imagine your body in a flow of time, most people would imagine the future ahead of them and the past behind them, and we're kind of facing the future and the past is back there. And I was like, that to me feels like, like one of the most difficult positions you can imagine yourself in time. Because with the future ahead of you, there's this sense of blindness. We have no idea what's going to happen there. We know that. So we're walking into this sense of the unknown, blindness. And everything we know is behind us, but we can't see it anymore because it's behind our heads, right? And that, just in and of itself, lends itself to all kinds of erasure. That's like in the Western world, you know, the ability to just ignore everything that's happened in the past and just think about the future is, again, very capitalist. It's very much like because you have to exploit everything around you even to be able to navigate some unknown future, right? Without the tools of the past. So for me, in an Afrofuturist relensing of time, I turn it around and imagine instead that we are facing the past, because that's everything we know, everything we have experienced, we see in front of us. And we're walking through that past, and the past is sort of moving around us like a toroid, which is actually the shape of the universe. All of our planetary bodies have this circular shape that goes in and out, or in and around. It's a donut type shape in like quantum physics and science. It's called the torus. But if we imagine time in the same way, we are walking into the past. And the past, and as we see everything that's happened in the past, we are making conscious choices around that. You know, we learn something and we're like, okay, we're not gonna do that, we're gonna go here now. So we learn these processes of navigation. And the way that we're learning is because the past is coming, we're walking through it, it's coming behind us, and it's feeding us from behind. All of the lessons that we've learned feed us and allow us to push through and create new futures. So our futures is behind us. Our past is in front of us. As we move through and we navigate everything that has happened, that changes and becomes the future that shifts and moves our body. So like I talked about before, that pressure, the pressure of everything that's to come is actually built by the way that we navigate everything we've known, right? And when you have it like that, then all of a sudden you have all of these ancestors, you have all of these resources, you have all of this information to help you create the future, right? Instead of being blind. And so simply turning ourselves around is also, again, a threshold space. This is an Afrofuturist movement. This is a saying, I can heal the past and it can feed my future from behind me, and I can build everything that's gonna come with a conscious foundation, rather than just being out here naked and have no idea what's going on and forgetting and erasing everything that was. And so that's my invitation and offering to you all as well, is like to reclaim that Afrofuturist revisioning of how time works, because you have more power than you know, and you have more resources than you know to be able to truly manifest what the future is that you want to make.
which is key. I think that goes back to Ebenezer's point, right? Because on the internet, you can see Afrofuturism thrown around as a term in a way that's completely meaningless and commercial, right, and what have you, and without much substance, right? And so it's really good to hear this elaboration of it, you know, like as a position, you know, principle and an ethic, right, and what have you, and not just something else. Western society will find a way to put a barcode like on everything and turn it into a grand proposal, you know. And so that was very powerful for me. All right, so this one last question. Okay, we have two.
And you have one too.
Okay, so let's go. So Josie, and then sorry, what's your name? Chris, you have your hand up, right? Okay, thank you, Chris.
Okay, hi, I'm Josie, and I wanted to say that I really enjoyed this work, and I interpreted the work as a form, like a guide per se, because I enjoyed like the visualizations and everything, but what I really enjoyed was interpreting it as like a call to action, because I noticed a lot of demands and like commands in some of the pieces of work. Specifically, like the question I'm gonna ask is like derived from what I did for like the project. Some of the sentences were like do not harm and like the words like enough, which was like very powerful and is like a direct command. So I wanted to ask, were there any like actions or mindsets that you wanted like the readers to translate into their everyday lives after reading this work?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you're right. There are so many places where it says, like, listen to this. You know, patience, time, silence, breath. You know, like there are places all the way throughout the book, and I think that reflects back on that this is like my most spiritual work in a way. I say that because there are teachings like that. There are true calls to action for us, and they're centered around this place of, yeah, I think I over and over, one of the things that comes up in this book is this idea of, I say silence. Their silence comes up a lot throughout, and the silence to me is deep listening, right? Silence is deep listening, and like miles of silence, right? There's this like equation of silence, space, time, distance. These are things that, again, our society does not want you to have. It's hard to even be silent anywhere. You walk around, like there's music everywhere, there's something everywhere, there's something, always, right? And to counter that, again, is a powerful thing that everyone can do. Like you can do it. Like you can pull back deep listening, because when we stop and listen, when we stop and we come into a place of reflection and silence, we're able to hear those small voices. We're able to actually hear the ancestors that live in our bones, you know, and they are there guiding us all of the time. And so for me, if there's any call to action inside this, it is to slow down, it's to listen deep, it's to care, literally carefully and intentionally with all of the things you have in your life, everything you do, you know. And it's not easy. It's like seems like really simple things. Probably the hardest thing, you know, is to slow down enough to hear those voices, right, and to be able to take heed of them and use that to move forward with the choices you make. So those are my calls for sure.
Chris?
Yeah, so I wanted to know, what was your thought process when you made these poems, like structuring them? And then to follow up, what made you choose this specific topic of reclaiming our bodies from the earth?
The structure of them, like I was saying too, in it is, it was organic. You know, a part of like how the jazz of it, you know, came from this process of you know, looking with soft eyes in Chinese medicine, which is another thing that I really love and do meditation and things like that. There's this quality where you can have your eyes drop focus. It's like you kind of bring your eyes to like a half mast. You might have seen pictures of Buddhas and they have like these kind of slit eyes. That is actually a meditation technique where you blur the hyper focus of everything you see. and just soften the gaze. Just let the eyes soften. It doesn't have to be closed. You actually want to keep them slightly open to allow light to come in. But it's just the light that comes in. The information and the fine-tuning gets soft. And I think structurally that's how I worked with this book. I got soft. I let my eyes kind of go half-mast until a particular word would clarify, right? And that built the functional, structural bit was just me kind of almost like a Qigong or a Tai Chi, right? Like listening, seeing, there. Listening, seeing, there. You know, coming and going inside that process. So the structure is built like that. And I think that that relates too to then this idea you said of like reclaiming our bodies out of the earth, right? That too is, again, softening, feeling. It's especially living in the city, it's kind of hard probably to get to like earth, but earth is also all around us. Like it is in every material, even in a cement jungle, you're still connected to the ground, right? There are ways to connect to the ground, and some of those things take sacrifice, right? And so the reclamation is actually a form of sacrifice too. We have to sacrifice some of our comfort. We have to sacrifice some of our ideas of our self and structure, and we have to let down our guard, soften our gaze, right? And that process then is what connects us back to that rewilding of the earth. The earth is not structured at all. Even though it might seem like it is, it's not. The earth is wild and organic and perfect. A tree is perfect. You know, it is. And so how can we also embrace that in our own bodies, in our lives, our own perfection by our relationship to our natural sense of self, right? Like that soft gaze relating to the earth. So.
And it's a good time to remember that wilderness is also the vocabulary of marronage, right? Because marronage is the antithesis of domestication, yes. Right? And brokenness for it, and that's where the term comes from in European languages, Spanish and Portuguese, which actually kind of intercept indigenous languages at the same time with that particular concept. But the idea of being undomesticated, yes. Right, is, so whenever you see the word wilderness, you see a coding, right, and a symptom of marronage, along with the spiritual part that coalesces with it. So I love the idea of like rewilding. Yes. Rewilding, all right. If we didn't miss any hands like already, this might be a good time to close this segment of our conversation and continue it on anew some other time, some other place. So thank you very much for coming out and spending your Saturday evening, the early part of it at least, here on Section Activity, and welcoming our guests. And a huge thank you for traveling down here and across the country to meet with us here in this location and talk about this incredible book that you've given us and your art in general. So join me in thanking Nikesha Breeze. And so Coco for being here and hosting, and I hope it's on.
Thank you so much, y'all. Have a beautiful rest of your night. Thank you. Oh, yeah, there will be books. If you don't have a book, you'd like to buy one, I'll sign books. You can get them at the front, and I'll sign them over here. Or if you already have a book, come on over, I'll sign it.
We got the best everything. We got the best everything. You come to Chicago, you're not gonna say that's nasty. Everything. Serious.